Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this 9th Cyberwatching webinar. We can see that people are gradually joining us. My name is Nick Ferguson, and I'm the coordinator of the Cyberwatching project. And this is actually our ninth webinar that we've been holding. And this time we've teamed up with 3 R&I projects to look at the topic of blockchain and how blockchain technologies can be used in different sectors. So we've teamed up with the SOFIE project, the PRIViLEDGE project, and the MyHealthMyData project. So to give you some context of behind today's webinar, so this is, as I said, this is the 9th of our webinar series, where cyberwatching is basically there to support projects in promoting their results and promoting their outputs. So a lot of money is invested by the European Commission into research to improve trust and reliability across the digital single market. And we support projects focusing on cybersecurity and privacy. We map them, we support their activities in clustering and collaboration, and we also help in terms of raising awareness of their outputs, as I said, in particular to public organisations and very much to small businesses who are really the backbone of and the beating heart of the digital single market. So, as I said, today's webinar focuses on blockchain technologies and the opportunities that it can bring to different vertical sectors. In particular, as I said, to sorry, my screen's just gone funny. In particular to what's happened here? Okay, the joys of a live transmission. So the particular the benefits it can bring to vertical sectors. So we have a range of different speakers, and we have speakers from the Digital SME Alliance. We have speakers who are going to basically give an overview of blockchain and basically give a definition to it and the benefits of it. We will then be looking at how it can be applied in different projects. Firstly, from the SOFIE project, in particular in the energy sector, and how it can enable seamless exchange of data across Europe for the energy sector. We'll also be hearing then from the PRIViLEDGE project and how it can improve, blockchain can improve efficiency and provide transparency in elections. So it being applied in an area which has very, very sensitive information and assuring integrity and confidence in voting. And then finally, in the health sector, with the MyHealthMyData project, which is developing new mechanisms of trust and value-based relationships between doctors and their patients, of course. Finally, with blockchain, you know, this is a disruptive technology. It's something which can really transform the lives of companies and in vertical sectors. We'll be looking at the GDPR and its implications on blockchain, whether or not it will be restrictive, and whether or not blockchain will need to change in some way to respect the GDPR. So we have 95 participants today registered, mostly from Europe, but we also see a lot of people from the research and innovation space, and also from SMEs as well. So with that, I'll hand over to Maria Diaz, who's our first speaker. So Julie, if you could pass the floor to Maria, she'll give us an overview of blockchain and the benefits of using it, in particular for SMEs.
Hello, everybody.
Maria.
Is everything correct?
Yeah, can you see my everything? Yeah, if you could put it in presenter mode, then
Yes,
everybody
of
will
course.
see it in full screen. Okay.
Okay, perfect. So hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much, Blockchain, for having me as one of the speakers. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Maria Diaz, and today I will be speaking on behalf of European Digital SME Alliance. So for those of you who are not very familiar with the organization, we're an umbrella organization, and our mission is to represent the voices of European digital SMEs and to place them at the center of the European digital agenda. So why? Why are we so interested in SMEs? Because basically they're the backbone of the economy. They represent the 99% of all businesses in the EU, and in the past years, 5 years, they have created around 85% of new jobs. So basically, their role is crucial to social and economic developments. But however, SMEs, they are vulnerable to long-standing size-related issues such as accessing markets, finance, higher productivity, competitiveness, a lot of issues that I'm sure that you're familiar with if you've ever worked for or with SMEs. So today, I am going to talk about the benefits that SMEs can obtain by applying blockchain technology solutions to their business models. I would like to start this presentation by saying that while blockchain is often related to larger companies, it brings a lot of new opportunities to SMEs in every sector. In that sense, there are multiple ways in which SMEs can adopt blockchain in their business plan, and I will talk to you about the most worthwhile applications / benefits that SMEs can access to from blockchain application. So I'd like to start with this graph. First of all, SMEs can benefit from payment solutions, also by the advantages provided by smart contracts. Supply chain management can also become improved. They can benefit by using distributed cloud storage, leaving behind the risks that come attached to traditional cloud storage. And also, there's a more secure digital identity by the application of blockchain. And finally, the data commerce becomes easier and more accessible for SMEs. So I'd like to start by payment solutions. So how is cryptocurrency beneficial for SMEs? Well, by using blockchain technologies, the intermediaries that slow down the transfer of funds are eliminated, and this provides a faster, a cheaper, and a more secure alternative to payments. In that sense, the funds are transferred directly and more securely. There's also reduced fees, and there's an increasing speed of transfer, which can be really useful for those organizations that make international payments. So in summary, by the application of blockchain in payments, it leads to the organizations in saving resources. Secondly, I'd like to speak about smart contracts. So as you all may know already, smart contracts are software programs that self-execute instructions inside a blockchain. Due to their nature, they ensure the implementation of the rules, making the data secure and lowering the risk of fraud. So in that sense, since consensus is autonomous and is done by the transactions are faster. Also, due to the nature of smart contracts, there is no need to pay intermediaries. So the costs will be lower and SMEs can stay competitive. Also, because smart contracts are immutable and unbreakable, transactions are more secure. So in general, it increases traceability, accountability, and security. Coming up next, I would like to speak about how supply chain management can be benefited by blockchain applications. So considering that items are not made by one single entity, a blockchain-based supply chain means that each transfer of hands is documented from manufacture to sale. As you can see in my PowerPoint, so the supply, the production, distribution, retail, every step is documented until it goes into the consumer. So what are the benefits of this? Apart from increased transparency and visibility, fraud is reduced, there is an improved inventory management, and the delays also financial costs are reduced. So how do smart contracts work in this? I've made a little graph that you can see in here. So basically, a supplier creates a smart contract. A buyer will validate that smart contract. The assets will be placed in escrow, and this smart contract is updated. So in that sense, we go to the fourth step, in which a shipment is tracked and delivered to the buyer. Once it's delivered to the buyer, the smart contract releases the asset to the supplier and the transaction is completed. It would have been really secure and really transparent. So coming up next, I'd like to speak about an innovation that's been brought by the technological capacities of blockchain, which is decentralized cloud storage. So cloud storage is necessary for all businesses that store data. And we have seen a trend of small business owners increasingly turning away from the traditional cloud storage, such as Amazon Web and Google Cloud. Why? Because first of all, these services are extremely expensive and they provide limited security and transparency. In fact, there has been major cloud hacks that have disrupted many credible companies that use this centralized cloud storage, as we have seen, I think it was last year with Tesla hack. So in that sense, a lot of business owners are becoming skeptical of centralized cloud platforms, and they're searching for new ways to store their company data. In that sense, a small number of blockchain-secured storage solutions have been created, and these ensure data at a lower price than centralized options. So a lot of people are a bit skeptical about the security procedures in the centralized cloud storages. Well, the same way people operate with a private cloud, a private centralized cloud with a password, with a decentralized cloud storage, you only need to use your private key. So for the file retrieval, you need to have your private key, and then you can decrypt your own files. Following this last thought of private key and decryptation, I'm going to continue with another benefit that blockchain has contributed to, which would be securing digital identity. Indeed, with the blockchain identity authentication, the only check performed is whether or not the transaction was signed by the correct private key. So this means that whoever has access to the private key is deemed to be the owner of the information, and the exact identity of the owner is deemed irrelevant. So goodbye to insecure password systems. With the blockchain-based authentication, digital signatures are based on cryptography, and these guarantee authentication without uncovering any individual or financial data of the user. And then lastly, the application that blockchain can benefit SMEs with is the data commerce. Well, SMEs, they often rely, they rely on data. And SMEs are vulnerable to security risks, they're vulnerable to piracy, and even to the human errors that can be found in these data. On top of that, the information that is purchased by SMEs comes from major monopoles who own all the data, such as Amazon or Facebook. In that sense, blockchain technology can be used to disrupt these tendencies. So rather than paying the cost of information that's already established by monopoles, SMEs can purchase blockchain-based, blockchain-verified datasets. Due to the nature of the blockchain technology, each data is attached to a block, and any changes made to that data will be transparent and assure security. Also, the source of the data is clear, and this will make safer for SMEs to obtain data without fear of obtaining information that has been already corrupted or manipulated. So, in summary, by introducing blockchain technology solutions, SMEs can see a reduction of cost, a speed increase of the transactions, an increased security, reduced fraud, and reduced risks. So certainly, the adaptation of blockchain technologies into business models will provide many benefits for SMEs. But let's not forget that many articles in the academia have addressed and stressed the fact that SMEs should be skeptical when evaluating an appropriation of a specific blockchain for their business. Why is this? Well, because blockchain is a solution, but for really specific problems. This means that while some blockchain solutions can be extremely beneficial for some SMEs, it may be less relevant for others. In that sense, a short-term management process to adopt the blockchain can end up with a waste of resources. And in the same side of the coin, finding out if a solution of blockchain is right for your company can be really expensive and time consuming. So if it comes to blockchain cybersecurity solutions, I would like to introduce and speak about an initiative that has been created by Cyberwatching, the Cyberwatching Marketplace. So what is the Cyberwatching Marketplace? First of all, it's a support action under Horizon 2020. And Cyberwatching has created a free platform that works as a solution provider for IT companies. Their value proposition focuses on SMEs, and it helps them to find cybersecurity solutions. Some of them are blockchain-based solutions. So in other words, they have tools that SMEs can use to produce or to adopt cybersecurity solutions, and many of them are blockchain-based. So who can benefit from this action? Users, any SMEs that looks for cybersecurity blockchain solutions, because these solutions are really easy to find, they're cheaper than the marketplace, it's really easy to contact the provider directly, or even providers that can show that want to register their cybersecurity blockchain solutions. So in summary, the Cyberwatching Marketplace is for those who develop and for those who use solutions. It's a solution provider, and if you're interested in adapting cybersecurity blockchain-based solutions for your company, you should go ahead and check this slide and to see exactly what the marketplace can offer to your organization. So thank you so much.
Maria, thank you very much. That was an excellent overview of certainly of the questions that businesses, small businesses have to ask themselves about whether or not blockchain is suitable for them, and also the benefits, of course. So that was great. And also thank you very much for the overview of the marketplace. So Digital SME Alliance are a key partner in the Cyberwatching project in terms of our bridge to the SME community. So I thank Maria for that. Okay, so the next speaker is Prit Anton. So Prit, sorry, Julie, if you can hand over the reins to Prit, that would be great. So Prit Anton works for Guard Time. It's very interesting to see Guard Time here because they come from Estonia, and we actually have a very Estonian flavor today. We have two speakers from Estonia who, of course, have led in government use of cloud computing in the past. So Prit is going to talk about the SOFIE project and how blockchain has been helping to enable energy flexibility services through data exchange between owner and service providers. So Prit, I hand over the floor to you. And I just wanted to say, if you have any questions, there's a little question tab in the dashboard, the GoToWebinar dashboard, so you can plop in your questions there, or you can also add them in the chat. Okay, so Prit, it's all yours.
Hello, thank you, Nicholas, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here and present in Cyberwatching event. So my name is Prit Anton, and I represent the company Guard Time. My responsibility is business development in energy sector. So that's correct. I'm going to walk you through about how blockchains can be useful in the energy sector, and mainly how they can enable the free energy data for the flexibility services. I think it's important to have a short introduction of what we mean by the energy flexibility services. So let me try to do it in a really simple way. So the real simple situation is that you have energy production and you have energy consumption, and one gets the finances from the other one, and that's as simple as that. But with the energy network in place that has not only the monetary aspect but also the balancing the grid and providing the services, it needs much more different aspects to take into consideration about like who gets paid and what amount, and the flexibility services are all about to energy producer what responsibilities they will have and then how they get paid, as well as the consumer or a prosumer, meaning that you are producing the energy on top of your house from the solar panels, as well as consuming the energy, to agree on the terms of payment. And this all needs the data to be accessible for agreeing on who is get for what amount. So I hope this gives an overview of what we see can blockchain benefit to in the future. So Guardtime is not alone in this. There is actually, the next slide. The Guardtime is involved in a EU innovation project called SOFIE that is taking a broader view of how blockchain technologies and distributed ledgers could be used to open up IoT platforms and provide the data exchange between different participants, and provide also the audit trails for different use. And there are 4 pilots in for the demonstration, and Guardtime is responsible for the energy data exchange pilot that I will go in more depth right now, and hopefully give you an understanding why blockchains could be useful here and what benefit it could bring to the participants. To start with that, the next slide. Yes, why we are in the energy sector in the first place. So there are 3 pillars I want to emphasize. The first one is the regulatory drivers that are currently in place, the EU Clean Energy Package, and of course also the GDPR that everybody has to comply with. And this means that the situation is going to change. The access to the data must be enabled to all the participants, and this is decision has been made from a European level. And the second challenge that we are facing in the near future is that the energy production is coming from not only one power plant, but actually 50% of the energy is produced from the renewable energy sources, solar panels, wind farms, and so on, so forth, which means that the pressure to the energy network and how you can trade and agree on who gets paid for what service is going to be much more complex. And that's why the actual race to offer suitable energy flexibility services to the market is ongoing, and we see a great opportunity from the distributed ledgers and blockchain side to help out on this race. And last but not least, the end user expectation, as is also defined in a GDPR, is that they have to be in control of their data and of course be able to choose which services they want to use. And this is also something that the software and infrastructure side has to take into consideration. So what is our approach and how we solve it? This is a SOFIE practical approach. Here on the bottom we have the data sources. There are many of them and they are different. So we have the household smart meters providing the data. There is also the national data hubs that are doing a great job of providing the data, at least in the country level, access to the flexibility service providers. But they also need to grant access to other participants in other countries. That is quite a challenge for these kind of systems. And on the top of the screen, we have the flexibility service providers, also the security and audit purpose organizations and regulators that all require the data access. So the data sources have the same challenge of how they can trust different parties, do the data normalization and solve the cybersecurity issues. And this is where the approach that we have developed in SOFIE comes to play. So we have the SOFIE energy grid adapters that will be put in place in each of the participants' side to enable the distributed ledgers and blockchain-based functionality. The core elements for our pilot is the Indie Hyperledger-based decentralized identities and Guardtime's own permission blockchain, KSA blockchain. And what it gives us is a way of granting the access or taking the access away from the data owner's perspective, and solving also the parts of how to securely grant access to the different participants and be also GDPR compliant to the process. So we are currently focusing on next slide, please. Yes, to smaller group of data sources because of a lack of resources, of course, from the project perspective. So we are integrated with SOFIE platform, and there is a plan to integrate also to at least 1 or 2 national data hubs as well. And we have groups of smart meter data sources also connected. And the vision that we have is that in the future, the data access in Europe could be controlled from the data owner side, so they will just make a few clicks from their phone or tablet and choose the service provider, and the rest has been done already for them in a seamless way. So right now we are looking for cooperation with these data sources, data owners, intraday energy brokers and retailers to discuss and elaborate how they could be part in this plan. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have when we have the questions answers session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Brit. So in fact, we do have times for questions. And one in particular has come in from Ninetta Polemi from the European Commission. You mentioned a couple of aspects there regarding the driving forces and the challenges rather for research. What other research problems are there for blockchain that need further attention? Do you have any any top areas which you think require further attention?
Yes, besides the ones, I understand this is question to me, correct?
Yes, that's right, Prit, yeah.
Okay. So I think besides the ones that are highlighted there, one of the a key issue is how we can integrate and take into account the existing systems requirements. So this is an important part from the project perspective, and also the interaction with many different participants is needed to understand like it's all in energy sector different from country to country in what level they are with their software development and the existing platforms, and then as the source of the data is mainly already operational in one or the other way. These integration challenges are a great concern, and then how blockchain and distributed ledgers could help out there is one of the challenges that I would highlight definitely, besides these ones that are already mentioned.
Thank you, Prit. And does it differ between types of energy as well? I mean, because you mentioned the importance of having energy brokers on board, etc. Are there different different sectors within energy? Are they pretty much similar? Or do they have a different structure?
I would say that from the data exchange perspective, granting the access, monitoring who is doing what, it doesn't differ so much if it's produced from the solar panels or wind turbines, or access is granted from the national data hub. So in that perspective, it's not so different, but from the perspective of what are the requirements and what is the initial setup of the one or the other participant in the value chain, this is very much different from one participant to another. So yeah, it should be taken like case by case, and I would say that in general the broad view is that the actual usage can be similar to different partners and participants.
Okay, thank you very much, Prit. So that's great. And if anyone has any further questions, you can also add them because we'll have a little thing at the end. So for now, what I'd like to do is thank Prit and move on to our next speaker, which is Sven Heiberg from Smartmatic. And he's going to be talking about the PRIViLEDGE project. So here we're going to change topic and look at elections. So establishing the correct balance between being transparent and about achieving integrity of an election result while maintaining confidentiality and applying blockchain technologies to this. So with that, Sven, I'd like to hand over to you if you can show your full screen, and then which I think you're already doing, and then the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nicholas, for the introduction. It's nice to be here in this webinar. I am Sven Heiberg, working for Smartmatic Cybernetica Center of Excellence for Internet Voting, and the focus of my job is online voting technology and its security. So today we are discussing the application of blockchain or distributed ledger technology for electronic voting bulletin boards, which is the topic that we work with in the PRIViLEDGE project. But just a second. Okay, I'm trying to change the slide. And now it happens. So first, if we speak about electronic voting or online voting, then we have a problem at hand that has some relatively specific challenge in it. And on the one hand, we are very interested in the correctness of the election result. We are interested in the integrity properties of online voting, such as eligibility, ballot box integrity, the correctness of the tabulation. And then, on the other hand, we have some specific confidentiality requirements, the ballot secrecy being the most prominent of them. And we want to be assured of the integrity. Moreover, we want to be able to prove that integrity to a party who is not responsible for carrying out the election. And this kind of transparency about achieving integrity, we need to achieve together with maintaining the confidentiality properties, such as ballot secrecy. Now, if we recall the traditional paper-based voting methods, then there the key element in achieving this transparency is observation. The observation of physical procedure. We have observers who go to polling stations, who are educated about the process and who visually observe that everything is carried out correctly, that there are no ballot box stuffing events, no vote removal events, etc. And then we have these electronic voting methods, and online vote being probably the most complex of them all because of its remote nature, where we simply cannot observe by using these standard approaches. So today, when we speak about online voting protocols that are transparent, then we speak about end-to-end verifiability and software independence, meaning that when an election is held with online voting as a voting method available, then certain data about this event is committed to before the beginning of the event, during the casting of the votes, and later also when calculating the voting result. And this data that is committed to, these commitments, they are based on voting protocol, cryptographic protocol that is well known and published before the actual event itself. So the idea there is that when the protocol is public and we can prove the security properties of the protocol and then assuming the security of the protocol, based on that data, we can analyze the end-to-end trail from the beginning of the election, from individual votes up to the correct tally. And the difficult part, of course, there is how to do this kind of analysis while also maintaining ballot secrecy, and also how to present a uniform view of these commitments to several independent parties. So in online voting protocols, we very often see a secret ingredient called web bulletin board, which in its properties is rather similar to more widely known blockchain technology. And until 2014, it was common agreement in the online voting community that we do not know how to implement such web bulletin board where we have these properties that that if we publish something, then it stays there, that we do not have clashes, that if we have a receipt for a vote, then this vote indeed is published there on the bulletin board. Before the 2014, we did not know. Then first protocols started to appear. But this also shows why we started looking towards the blockchain technology, and many companies, researchers started looking towards blockchain technology, trying to use this as either a digital distributed ballot box for electronic votes, or also as a ledger for storing commitments from the protocol. And many of these attempts, if we look at the public blockchain platforms such as Bitcoin or Ethereum, then we very soon land into problems such, on the one hand, we have widely available public infrastructure that implements this blockchain technology that could pretty much be plugged in and used. And then we have the problems such as transaction rate or the lack of guarantees of timely acceptance, meaning that when I cast my vote on online voting system, then I cannot be sure if this vote is accepted in 1 hour, 5 minutes, 2 hours, or at all. And of course, also the key element in the blockchain technology security, which is the distribution of the computational power. And whereas if we look into these particular types of blockchain, we actually see that the computational power is more and more centralized. Well, the next set of problems that also needs our attention when we consider using blockchain technology for publishing data about online voting, about elections, is the long-term confidentiality of that data. And in Estonia, first online election was held in 2005, first legally binding online election. And at that time, the RSA encryption method was used for encrypting the ballots, and I do not now remember anymore what were the key lengths used at that time. But we do know what has happened to the RSA method and to the security of it with the respect to a key length over a time. So what we could consider sufficient key length for encrypting some data 20 years ago is not that anymore. And with the blockchain, if we commit election data there, if we are not careful about what we commit, then we find ourselves in the situation in longer future where suddenly it may become public how we voted maybe 20 or 30 or 50 years ago. So it's in a way the question of balance between the integrity and the confidentiality in online voting. If we think about the integrity of the election result, then the period of an election event is relatively short-lived. Okay, if we vote for a parliament, then after the voting day, maybe 2 months, and then this decision about the parliament is finalized. 4 more years, and in a way, we cannot question that result anymore. Whereas the privacy of those votes, how you voted 20 or 30 years ago in parliamentary election, may still be important for you. This is currently an ongoing work for us in the PRIViLEDGE project to actually bring in distributed ledger technology to make the auditing of an online voting more accessible to the auditors who are not and who should not be part of the organization that is carrying out the election. and at the same time to understand how the protocol must be designed in order to respect the ballot secrecy over long periods of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting stuff, and especially about you know, the issue of keeping your voting secret to 20 or 30 years later. That's a very important consideration. So thank you very much, Sven, for that. What we'll do now is we'll pass. So if you have any questions, as I said, if you can put them in the chat, or in the questions box, and we'll have time at the end. If I pass now to Mirko Di Malde from Linkias, and he's going to tell us about well, we're getting more and more into very, very private data, aren't we? And now we go into the health data with work from the MyHealthMyData project. So Mirko, over to you if you would like to share your screen and put it on full presentation mode. Hi,
Hello,
Mirko.
everybody. You should be able to see my screen now.
If you put it on presenter mode, and then we'll get your full.
Yeah, I should be presenter now.
We think you might be sharing your second screen. I'll tell you what.
Give me 1 second. It should be this one. Is that
wonderful?
All right?
Perfect.
Thank you so much. So thank you for this opportunity of sharing our experience with the MyHealthMyData project. I'm Mirko Di Malde. I'm Chief Operation Officer at Linkias, which is the project coordinator for MyHealthMyData. Linkias is a small consultancy company based in Italy, and we have built expertise in the e-health domain, health data privacy and security, blockchain-based platform for health data sharing, clinical decision support system, and also privacy regulation and ethic issue related again to health data exchange. I will provide some context about the motivation behind MyHealthMyData. And the first and most obvious one is, of course, the fact that in a way, medicine is a bright example of health data explosion. And we will see this trend bringing more and more data into this domain in the very next future. Also because beside clinical data generated as usual into the hospital and clinical domain, we will see this increase in patient-generated data, so-called personal wellness data, behavioral, environmental data, also self-reported data from medical Internet of Things. So will be an emerging and growing issue in managing in an appropriate way health data in the future. There are also security issues, of course. We have seen in the past few years a growing issue with security in the health data domain, with a number of increasing hacking incidents concerning hospitals, concerning healthcare organizations. Even recently, we've seen recently the Google scandal. I mean, has been discussed past week with this usage of private data for maybe commercial purposes. We don't really know. And at the same time, there is an emerging need for acknowledging some sort of control or property over personal health data directly to the individuals. And in different shape or form, there are a number of initiatives going on right now. But even if we don't really go to data ownership as such, also the General Data Protection Regulation has been mentioned before, already gives new kind of rights to the individuals in terms of data access, right to data portability, and the key feature of consent for personal data processing. So this is the context in which MyHealthMyData has been really conceived at the beginning of mid-2016. This project started in November 2016 and will be completed by the end of this year. So we've been focusing mostly on three key issues: portability of data in particular, to allow and facilitate individual access to health data; security of the data, also with this new concern of health data security in the hospital domains, but growingly with IoT device and so on and so forth, and enhance the data value, meaning allowing the usage of data for new research and new discoveries, and to create also economic value. Quickly, data-related pain points, which are still relevant for MyHealthMyData and for the usage of blockchain in the healthcare domain. We are actually in a data rich by information poor paradox, meaning that we have data, but with the limitation in access and limitation in control of data, we can really not use them appropriately. It's very difficult to move data from one place to another and give access to data, in particular for healthcare providers, and the usage in research commercial purposes is limited and difficult. So all these are the key points for motivating MyHealthMyData. And quickly, in blockchain relevance to health data management in general, and there are a number of initiatives I won't mention now in this field. We can actually use blockchain to overcome centralized healthcare data management, enable self-sovereignty and patient-centric healthcare, also allowing this direct control of health data through personal data wallet, and something that we have been seeing emerging in the past few years. Thus facilitating health data exchange, also directly triggered and controlled by the patient themselves, that might be interested in sharing data with researchers, with private companies, and so on and so forth, and allowing also individual patients to engage in a more profound way with their health and with their data. So MyHealthMyData, it's of course, this is quickly, I'll show the consortium. We have clinical partners that are testing our platform, research centers and academia creating the whole system, a number of SMEs which have been working together to create this, the final outcome of the project, and a legal consultancy, Panetta Associati, and the Siemens Healthineers as industrial partner. Few key goals of the project: empowerment of citizen, as we mentioned before, data privacy and security through blockchain identification and encryption systems, and data value enhancement, using again blockchain and allowing the control and management of access to data through this technology. So for doing this, we have created a blockchain-based platform which also uses smart contract. I will tell something more about that later. For managing data, registering data, so that data actually are available into the network of MyHealthMyData. Create also a personal data account. We created a mobile application which allows each individual to select their consent preferences and then control the data access through this consent preference in an automated fashion using a dedicated smart contract. And we also created, adopted a number of security and privacy preservation tools, such as homomorphic encryption, secure multi-party computation, and pseudonymization and anonymization tools, which are triggered automatically using the blockchain in a way that data are always cleared and are always consented before being shared into the network. And this greatly facilitates the health data exchange, because ensure each stakeholder in this environment, hospitals, research center, private entities, and patients themselves, that data are always shared following permission rules set forth by the data owner, the data controller, and they can only be accessed whether the consent allows that, and each data access is always traceable into the blockchain in a way that you can always go back to whoever accesses the data, whoever controls the data, and what sort of usage has been made of the data itself, which is very important, in particular when we talk about health, personal health data. We use Hyperledger Fabric as a basis for our system, also because it's lightweight and it's more easily deployed into existing IT legacy system, and also allows to create rules for sharing the responsibility amongst the nodes in a way that existing a legal framework can be represented into the system. And it's also, of course, a permission blockchain, or private one, a consortium blockchain, actually, meaning that each partner is vetted and selected at the beginning, so we know who is acting in this environment, and we can also hold liable any partner for specific misbehavior or error made during the handling of data. In MyHealthMyData, blockchain acts as a sort of a traffic light because, first of all, it manages and authorizes data exchange and access according to user-defined rules, consent, and policies, meaning that, of course, we have defined an interface for setting forth this permission and consent policies, and then the blockchain actually automatically enforces those policies, provides for traceability for the of data access and exchange, as I was mentioning before, apply automatically the privacy preservation tool I've been mentioning before as human-to-party computation, and ultimately facilitate GDPR compliance, also in regard to right to erasure and correction, but also by attaching to each data item its consent, and ensuring that only consented data are actually shared into the network. Very quickly, by usage of the blockchain and the mobile application, we also managed to make the patient enter into the loop for health data management, again allowing them to create the condition for which the data can be accessed and shared. And as I was mentioning before, and with this I will conclude, we also use blockchain to activate automatically data privacy and security technologies such as data anonymization, key anonymization, and other techniques, but also secure multi-party computation, very important, because we allow a researcher to activate a data analytics process without accessing actually the data, but only accessing the results of analytics, which is made through secure multi-party computation, which is orchestrated by blockchain. And we also applied homomorphic encryption to the data, which also, this is nice to mention, we won the partner who implemented the solution, the University of Brasov, won the Industrial and Enabling Tech Prize in 2019. With this, I think I've done my 10 minutes. So if there are any questions, please.
Thank you very much, Mirko. That was excellent. What we'll do is we have got a couple of questions that have come in, and we'll deal with them at the end. One question in particular about health data and GDPR. So I think we'll keep that to the end, because our next presenter is an ICT lawyer. She's Anastasia Botsi from ICT Legal Consulting, and she's going to look at the big hanging question, really. Where does blockchain fit in with regards to the GDPR? So Anastasia, Julie's going to share everything with you, and I think we may have your screensaver at the minute. Are you there, Anastasia?
One moment. There seems to be some trouble with the permissions. Give me 1 second.
So while we wait, oh no, here she comes.
For some reason, it's not.
Anastasia, what we can do is we'll let Julie show your slides, okay? And you just say when you want to change slides and she'll change it for you, okay? It's a good quote you've got there, though.
Thanks.
There you go. Okay, Anastasia, over to you.
Okay. So hello everyone. Sorry for keeping you a little some minutes later. My name is Anastasia Bozzi. I'm an associate of ICT Legal Consulting. We are a legal firm based in Italy, providing basically legal consulting services on the sphere of information communications and technology. And today we will be presenting you the legal aspects of blockchain technology. Next slide, please. So when someone thinks about the first questions, the legal questions that are fundamental on this topic, we can think about what are the legal implications on blockchain, how can blockchain be regulated, and also, of course, what benefits can be brought through this technology in the regulatory framework. Next slide, please. Moving on to the next slide. When we look at personal data under the blockchain technology, we can see that as of itself, personal data has a very broad definition. Specifically, the GDPR states that it includes any information relating to an identified or identifiable person. So that includes not only details that can be identified, that can identify the individuals, but it also includes any other information that may link an individual and allow them to be identified. So that means that even if we do have an encrypted personal data, encrypted information, there is this mistaken understanding that this is not personal data. Well, this is wrong. So even when we speak about encrypted data, the GDPR categorizes it as a sort of pseudonymized data. Therefore, we also need to consider encrypted data as personal data. Next slide, please. When we look into the blockchain personal data, we can find that there's two types of data involved. The first type is the metadata, and that is essentially any information that relates to an upload made onto the blockchain. This has been widely discussed among data protection authorities, and it has been concluded that even metadata can include personal data, especially because the user that has uploaded the information usually can be deducted through the keys or other information that may connect them to the data that they uploaded. And then secondly, next slide please, we have the actual transactional data, which is the information which has been uploaded onto the blockchain. And here it's quite usual and reasonable to assume that there may also be personal data included within this data. Now, next slide, please. We can take a look at the data protection principles which stem from the GDPR and find the middle ground between the regulation, which is a very generic regulation that attempted essentially to cover most processing activities within the European Union, and these emerging technologies that the regulators and the market will have to deal with as technology evolves. So we will try to see what the principle is and then understand what the implications of blockchain and of the principle towards blockchain are. So when we look at lawfulness, fairness, and transparency, which is a principle which has been mashed together, we will divide it into three. The lawfulness component essentially states that you cannot process personal data without having a legal basis. The problem with blockchain is that generally there is not an actual purpose for the processing, because the blockchain is rather a means to achieve your given purpose. Therefore, it's important to identify the reason for which the personal data are processed through the blockchain system. Once you have the reason to process, you can very easily identify a legal basis that is appropriate for that purpose. And just as examples, we have come across cases where an individual's consent could be leveraged, as very rightly mentioned by my previous colleague, but also we can rely on the need to perform on a contract, or the need to comply with an applicable law, or even the pursuance of legitimate interests. Next slide, please. Then we have the principle of fairness, which comprises of the fact that all data must be processed in a fair manner. Here, what we have in terms of blockchain is that any system that is meant to handle personal data needs to be carefully designed in order to ensure that the privacy, autonomy, and integrity of the individuals are not harmed. And of course, the same goes for organizations that wish to make use of the blockchain systems in order to process their personal data. And it's needless to say that carrying out a data protection impact assessment is an important exercise, even when that is not required. So generally, we tend to recommend that DPIAs, as we like to call them, are essential tools in order to understand and to make sure that your systems and the processing occur in a fair manner. And lastly, part of fairness is also the manner with which individuals are informed. And if we move on to the next slide, this perfectly ties in with the last component of this principle, which is the transparency element. In this context, within the blockchain context, it's not always easy to identify the information that must be communicated to the individual, and this is exceptionally the case for public blockchains. Sometimes it seems to be impossible to identify, for example, the recipients of the personal data, or the retention periods that may be incompatible with on-chain data storage. So we see that this principle might be harder to achieve in a public blockchain. However, one way to move over this obstacle is to choose for a private blockchain, where it might be easier and more controlled environment, and therefore this principle will be easier to adhere to. Next principle is the principle of purpose limitation. This is a very well-known principle in which connects to the first one that we talked about, of lawfulness, and essentially what it comprises is that all organizations need to ensure that they have a specific purpose for which they collect and process personal data. And particularly what is interesting for blockchain is that blockchain may be able to reuse the data or combine it in future cases, and under the GDPR, this would be incompatible. This would be an incompatible purpose. Therefore, if storage occurs or any other processing occurs which is not compatible with the initial purpose of collection, then this can only be justified as long as you're doing it for archiving purposes under the public interest. So this principle comes quite in conflict with the concept of blockchain and with the functioning of blockchain. Therefore, it is a principle that must be very carefully evaluated. Moving on, we have the principle of data minimization. This also is another principle which is a potential major obstacle to blockchain. The reason for that is because under this principle, blockchain should only be used in order to handle personal data if it's necessary. And under European law, this means that there are no other less intrusive means available. So this may be a hard principle to handle and to comply with. However, it seems that off-chain storage might be an approach that helps organizations move, kind of at least attempt to comply with this principle, while on-chain storage, of course, comes completely at conflict with the essence of this principle. Moving on, we have a principle quite closely related to the data minimization principle, which is the principle of accuracy. And here we have another obstacle in terms of compliance for the GDPR. What we find is that it's especially hard to amend any personal data that's already included in the blockchain, since this cannot be retroactively amended. However, there are different techniques that have been used by organizations, such as adding supplemental data to the blockchain. And of course, it does not mean that if a majority of nodes participating in the system cannot rewrite the chain. Of course, that's always possible. However, it seems to be quite hard to do, and it seems to have quite an unpredictable result. Therefore, this principle as well needs to be carefully evaluated. And again, it seems that off-chain storage also seems to help in terms of complying with this principle. So with basically choosing to have off-chain storage, you may be able to comply, or at least demonstrate your compliance, both with the principle of data minimization as well as the principle of data accuracy. And almost done, we have the principle of storage limitation, which essentially considers that the data must be erased and it must be held for only as long as it's necessary. This is also comes into conflict with the nature of the blockchain systems. However, what could be done in order to move on from this obstacle, or to at least demonstrate compliance, is to disable the reading and writing access of others. And it can be arguable that this is an equivalent result as deletion. However, this, of course, needs to be further stated by more official legislators, or the Article 29 Working Party, which is now the European Data Protection Board. Moving on, we have the principle of integrity and confidentiality, which is a very big component of the GDPR. Essentially covers that any processing that is done must be securely, must find security measures, both technical and organizational, in order to ensure the integrity and confidentiality of the personal data. Therefore, here what is important is to conduct a data protection impact assessment, with which you can analyze the risk. And once you have the risk level, then you can allocate the resources and the security measures that are applicable for the processing. So, for example, processing of personal data, just of generic personal data, does not require the same security measures as processing health data, for example, as again has been mentioned earlier in our webinar. And last but not least, to end on a good note, we have the principle of accountability, which is the overarching principle of the GDPR. And interestingly, it has been noted that blockchain can also be leveraged as a tool for accountability. And that can include, for example, assuming the role of records of processing activities, mostly because the blockchain system can keep record of all the operations which are carried out. So not only do we have principles that go against or that seem to not be so applicable for blockchain, but we also have some principles that blockchain can be of help, in the GDPR obligations and requirements. Moving on, we have one last principle that I would like to discuss before we go, which is the principle of data protection by design and fairness by design, which actually this concept has been founded by ICTLC's founder, Dr. Paolo Balboni. And what this fairness by design is that whatever you do with your processing, however you choose to process the personal data, this must be done in a fair and by default and by design manner. So it becomes extremely important to make sure that all this activity is done at the design stage and not as a byproduct later on, when you realize that it's important to also have some privacy considerations. If we can move on to a couple of slides to personal data and blockchain, our conclusions, because I believe we don't have time to go over. However, these slides will be provided. Here we go. So you can always take a look at them later on and take time to reflect upon the more in-depth data protection impact assessment considerations. So if we look back and we try to summarize what we've seen today and what we've discussed, we can find that surely blockchain technology and data protection principles do not see eye to eye on all matters. So for example, it might be harder to comply with the principles of data minimization, with storage limitation, as well as with providing the data subjects with the rights to exercise all their data subject rights. Of course, there are also significant issues in assigning data protection roles. We haven't discussed it very much in depth, but this essentially covers the fact that it's unsure which recipients may receive the data, and therefore it's also unsure whether international transfers of data have occurred. However, we've come to realize that maybe off-chain storage could be a method of allowing the blockchain system to continue to comply with the GDPR. Therefore, if off-chain storage of personal data is possible, it could be an effective method of overcoming the obstacles that we mentioned. And lastly, but very importantly, while blockchain systems have the potential to empower the data subjects, the data protection principles must always be considered from the design phase. That way, even the principles that might be hard to comply with will be worked on, and a solution will be found before the systems are implemented and process personal data. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Anastasia. That was very interesting, especially on the final slides about the privacy by design. This is a very important thing, I think, given the changing landscape as well. So what I'd like to do is just I'd like to ask the last three speakers the same question that we put to Prit a while ago. So the question actually comes from the European Commission, because as you know, they're in the phase where they're identifying what the research priorities are, in particular for the Horizon Europe and the Digital Europe program. So I'll start with you, Sven, and then we'll go to Mirko, and then finally back to you, Anastasia. So what are the research problems of blockchain, and where would you recommend there be further attention? I know maybe you've covered some of these points in your slides, but if you could answer that question. So over to you, Sven.
Yes, thank you for the question. Coming from the field of online voting, we look at blockchain as a specific tool that can help us to solve one part voting, online voting equation. And if we focus on that, we consider blockchain very helpful or potentially helpful in achieving the transparency and integrity in online voting. But there it becomes for us very important how at the same time to maintain privacy. So in that sense, we are in the right place in the PRIViLEDGE project, where we are looking at privacy in distributed ledger technology. Now, if we look further, then if I, as somebody who is seeking to apply blockchain for the benefit of my application domain, then it is the question of the security guarantees that one or other approach would give me. And this may not be a research question, but it is definitely a question that those who are seeking to apply it are going to have. And yeah, this
Thank you.
That's that.
Perfect. Thank you, Sven. Okay, so if I hand over to Mirko from a health data perspective.
I would say two fundamental research priority, I think, would be worthwhile exploring in the next programs. The first is surely the interoperability between different solutions that are emerging in this field of blockchain-based healthcare data management. It's very important to allowing to guaranteeing continuity of service for the end user, in particular the individual citizen. Say, for example, in terms of cross-border data exchange, you want to make sure that whatever is the service provider available, whatever is the blockchain solution that's working in different areas, and maybe allowing access or control or exchange of specific data to allow data to move from one healthcare institution to another. In any case, you need to ensure that the transaction is finalized and the data can be accessed where needed and where it's needed. And this can only be actually ensured if full interoperability between different solutions, different blockchain-based architecture is ensured. And a second line of research I would explore in particular is there is an emerging trend, which has been mentioned earlier in this webinar, for distributed data storage. So the concept of storage of data in centralized places will fade in the future, and we will have this distributed way of having data here and there. Now, I don't know whether this will happen also for healthcare data because of their particular nature, but in any case, exploring ways in which distributed data storage solution can be combined with blockchain technologies, and also what are the implications, for example, in terms of portability, because it might change even in a very significant way how the concept itself of portability can be unfolded, and the consequences for the again for the end user, for the citizen, might be huge. So these are the two research areas in which I would personally focus.
Thank you, Mirko. Very clear. Very interesting point about the storage as well, and the impact on citizens too. So thanks for that. Anastasia, I'll pass this to you now. Where are the hot points for future research?
That's a great question. In terms of the legal components, we see that there is a gap on practical tools, but also kind of research on what are ways to use the current regulations, so the GDPR, the NIS directive, which can also be applicable for specific services. How can we use these tools to ensure that the application is compliant? The application of blockchain at the moment seems to be focused only on data subject rights, but not much focused on all the other expectations which might apply to other emerging technologies. Therefore, there is a big gap of doing some research in between and in interdisciplinary field between technology and law, and not law per se, but regulation in general, in order to find what are the best solutions of regulating this technology, and how can we make sure that fairness and privacy by design can occur for these technologies. So focusing on privacy by design and fairness by design.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Anastasia. And I'd like to highlight, I think maybe you were about to say this at the end, thanks to ICT Legal, the Cyberwatching has a tool dedicated to helping companies decide how at risk they are of sanction from the GDPR. And this is, which Julie's just putting up now on the screen. Thanks, Julie. And this is basically a free tool, and it's a self-assessment tool which can be used by any organization. So thanks, Anastasia, for your final point. What we'll do is we'll get in touch with all of the speakers afterwards, and I think, you know, we'll try and put some of these recommendations together in a one-pager and send this to the European Commission. So finally, I'd also like to thank all of our speakers, and thank you all also for staying on. We've gone over time, but I think it's been worth it. We've had some excellent input from all of our speakers from new areas where blockchain is being deployed, and of course the interesting points about the GDPR and legal perspectives. There's the little image of the GDPR tool there, so you can access it online anytime you would like. And finally, I'd also like to just highlight, with privacy very much in mind, the annual privacy forum, which is organised mainly by NISA, which is taking place in June, and there's a call for papers basically open at the moment, and this is a big deal for the discussion on privacy and emerging technologies, not just blockchain, but also artificial intelligence, for example. So you know, this is open for participants across Europe to apply with a paper and also to attend in June. So with that, once again, thank you everybody for staying online. Thank you for all of our speakers who've been really good today. It's a very interesting webinar. Watch this space because we'll be coming up with another webinar, hopefully before Christmas, which could be focusing on our technology radar. So our project radar that is available on the Cyberwatching website. And again, we'll be picking a theme where we have a group of projects which are focusing on a certain technology, and we'll be trying to raise awareness of this and also the advantage of use by companies across Europe. So thank you very much, everybody. We'll be publishing the slides and the recording of this very, very shortly. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.